The question now is, how much capacity do automakers have to shift production of vehicle components back to the United States? Many of these parts are already compliant with USMCA regulations, with the majority sourced from within the US itself, so there are several strategic steps that could be taken. However, the situation could quickly spiral into chaos if a 25% tariff is imposed on 7.38 million vehicles. Ford CEO didn't mince words, calling the proposal straight-up chaos, a term more fitting for a disaster movie than economic policy. When automotive leaders start using such language, it's worth paying attention. In today's video, I'll explain how Trump's aggressive tariff strategy might force GM to either shell out $59 billion to relocate its operations back to the US or push those costs onto consumers. Either outcome would significantly impact the price of your next car. Before we dive in, I'd appreciate it if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, especially since over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything, but it makes a huge difference to us, so did you hit that subscribe button? Great, thank you. Now, back to the video. What happens when a former president labels your entire business model as un-American? Just ask GM CEO Mary Barra, who's currently facing the corporate version of a 3 a.m. Twitter rant. Yes, the Orange Man is at it again, this time taking aim at cars. Not just any cars, but foreign-made ones, which he sees as job-stealing metal boxes undermining American workers. To combat this, Trump has proposed a sweeping 25% tariff on 7.38 million imported vehicles, claiming it would offset $4 to $5 billion in losses. The message is clear. In his eyes, nothing screams, "Make America Great Again," like making cars dramatically more expensive overnight. The goal? To pressure companies like GM into shifting production out of Mexico and Canada and bringing those jobs back to the US. The situation can be likened to a child insisting everyone plays only with his toys, or else he'll take his ball and go home. This kind of mindset poses a serious challenge for GM, a company that has spent decades building an intricate supply chain in which cars and parts cross borders seamlessly, much like teenagers sneaking out after curfew. Approximately 45% of GM's vehicles sold in the US are manufactured in Mexico and Canada, a substantial portion that represents billions in potential tariff costs. If disrupted, it would hit GM like a financial sledgehammer. President Trump, meanwhile, continues to position himself as a champion of the American worker, using rallies to call out corporations for moving jobs abroad. Inside GM's boardrooms, executives are likely grappling with the frustration of trying to explain complex global economics to a president who views trade as a zero-sum game. While he assures his supporters that manufacturing jobs will miraculously return to the Midwest, the reality is far more complicated. This isn't a game of economic peekaboo. Former President Trump told a crowd in Michigan last week that automakers would have no choice but to return manufacturing to the US, declaring, "Either they build here and hire American workers, or they pay. It's very simple." But how feasible is that really? While some parts in vehicles are already compliant with the USMCA, and much of the supply chain is based in the US, relocating full production is far from straightforward. Modern auto manufacturing is incredibly complex, more like performing brain surgery while riding a unicycle than a simple economic decision. For General Motors, the stakes are high. Last year alone, they imported around 650,000 vehicles from Mexico and Canada. If a 25% tariff were imposed, it would add thousands of dollars to the cost of each car, forcing GM to either absorb the hit, pass it on to consumers, or invest massively in rebuilding US factories. Trump's threats of tariffs resemble a toddler flipping over a monopoly board because the hotels aren't on his properties, with little regard for the rules, the system, or the fact that others are playing too. Trump's outrage over GM's operations isn't truly rooted in a concern for American jobs, it's more about securing a political victory he can showcase. For him, it's not about the complexities of global supply chains or the realities of modern manufacturing. What matters is having a simple, rally-friendly slogan like the jobs, jobs, jobs that resonates with his base. The president himself acknowledged that some facilities are only operating at 60% capacity and that it's not as easy as flipping a switch. Despite this, He continues to tout job numbers, such as the 50,000 trucks to be built in Fort Wayne, Indiana, as major wins. Ultimately, Trump seems more interested in the appearance of saving American manufacturing than in actually understanding how it works. He wants the accolades without putting in the effort, akin to demanding an A+ on a test he didn't study for, and threatening to burn the school down if he doesn't get it. Now, as he targets GM's business model, the company is preparing to face off against a leader willing to wreck the game just to claim victory. Some people seem to think international trade is as simple as an episode of The Apprentice, as if you can just point fingers and remove countries from your supply chain without consequence. But that's far from reality. Take GM, for example. CEO Mary Barra is not only grappling with tariff threats but also with a misguided, outdated vision of American manufacturing that hasn't existed since the 1950s. This kind of thinking could end up costing American car buyers thousands of dollars per vehicle. Imagine spending decades carefully building a global supply chain, only to have it threatened overnight by sudden political decisions, like billions in tariffs, because someone decides to disrupt everything on a whim. That's the nightmare GM is facing right now. Barra likely starts each day with a jolt, reading the latest trade threats on her phone. GM has invested years refining a vast manufacturing network across North America, including 4 major plants in Mexico producing high-demand vehicles like the Chevy Silverado, Blazer, and Equinox. And while Barra hasn't disclosed the full extent of her conversations with President Trump since he took office, it's clear that GM is waiting to act only when official announcements are made, allowing the company to provide informed guidance during this turbulent time. These factories are far from random. They're high-output production hubs, churning out nearly 250,000 Equinox SUVs annually. In fact, GM's Mexican plants alone are responsible for manufacturing 60% of all electric vehicles produced in Mexico. The implications of proposed tariffs are serious. If tariffs were to be implemented on vehicles built in Mexico or Canada, the cost per vehicle could rise by about $3,000. That's equivalent to tacking on a luxury leather package no one asked for. The auto industry is complex, capital-intensive, and heavily reliant on global supply chains. Relocating production isn't as simple as loading up a U-Haul and moving over the weekend. As these potential tariffs loom, domestic manufacturers like Tesla, with their US-based operations, would likely benefit, while companies like GM scramble to adapt. Although GM's public response has been calm, insiders report initial panic. CEO Mary Barra stated that the company might be able to offset 30% to 50% of the added costs without requiring major new investments. How they plan to do that, however, remains unclear, though some speculate it could involve subtle cost-cutting measures, like shrinking the size of cup holders and rebranding them as a feature. This situation represents a strategic move aimed at reducing costs, but it leaves General Motors in a tough spot with 3 unappealing choices. They could absorb the additional expenses themselves, which would rapidly erode their profits. They could pass the costs on to consumers, likely leading to a sharp drop in sales, or they could invest billions to relocate factories back to the US, a move akin to rebuilding your entire house just because someone dislikes your mailbox. It's interesting to observe how various automakers respond to the same crisis. GM CEO, Mary Barra, maintains a composed and professional demeanor, focusing on contingency planning and risk mitigation. In stark contrast, Ford CEO, Jim Farley, seems to take a more frantic approach, painting a picture of chaos and urgency. Despite facing the same challenges, the two leaders exhibit strikingly different strategies, one calculated and methodical, the other reactive and alarmed. Mary Barra informed shareholders that tariffs on imported cars and auto parts could cost General Motors between $4 billion and $5 billion. The company had been engaged in discussions with the administration for several months, working closely with the president and other officials. GM now finds itself in a delicate position, on one hand, reassuring investors that everything is under control, and on the other, signaling to the administration that they are taking the tariff threat seriously. CFO Paul Jacobson mentioned that the company is evaluating a range of actions, which is essentially corporate language for trying to manage a difficult situation without appearing panicked. If the proposed 25% tariff takes effect, it could severely damage the American car market. Vehicle prices would likely surge, consumer choices would narrow as companies discontinue less profitable, lower-cost models, and, ironically, the policy could lead to a net loss in American jobs if companies like GM are unable to sell cars due to inflated prices. The American Automotive Policy Council, which represents Detroit's big three automakers, has expressed concern over potential job losses, emphasizing that fewer workers will be needed across the board, including in the United States. They argue that they already source most of their steel and aluminum from domestic and nearby suppliers, essentially making the case, "We're already quite American, please don't dismantle our entire business model." Despite the challenges, they expressed appreciation to the Trump administration for rolling back some tariffs on imported parts, viewing it as a positive step and expressing hope for further adjustments. "We're very appreciative that the president provided that clarity," one representative noted. Still, General Motors is not backing down quietly. The company has a plan to adapt, though it will come at a significant cost. They're not going to back down just because a former reality TV star wants to play tariff king. These companies have survived bankruptcies, recalls, and the challenges of the 1970s. Now, it's just another battle in the corporate survival game. The only difference is this time, the final boss has bizarre orange skin and can't resist posting on social media. When facing a 25% tariff apocalypse, what's your move? If you're GM, it seems to be emptying your entire bank account and hoping it works. The car giant is now facing a $59 billion investment plan to bring production back to the US. And no, that's not a typo, $59 billion. It's like buying $200 million worth of hamburgers and throwing them at Trump Tower, hoping the orange man will be pleased. This desperate move isn't something GM wanted, but it's what they need to survive Trump's tariff threat. They're essentially being forced to relocate their entire operation, like fleeing an angry landlord in the middle of the night, except this time, they're not carrying furniture. GM is currently facing an enormous challenge as it works to relocate entire factory lines, thousands of workers, and complex supply chains. Moving a car factory is not as simple as shifting your desk across the room. The company must build entirely new facilities, train a new workforce, and convince hundreds of suppliers to follow suit. It's like trying to cook dinner while someone is literally moving your kitchen to another house. That's the situation GM is in right now, trying to keep production running while completely overhauling the way they manufacture cars. To make matters even more difficult, GM is already deeply invested in its plans for electric vehicles. The company has promised to transition to an all-electric future in the coming years, which has already meant billions of dollars spent on battery plants and new technologies. Now, GM must juggle this ambitious electric vehicle shift while simultaneously relocating all operations back to America. It's akin to trying to change clothes while running a marathon in the middle of a thunderstorm. Despite the chaos, GM's PR team is working hard to spin this as a patriotic effort, emphasizing their investment in America's future. Executives may smile, but it's clear that their expressions are forced, with their eyes twitching uncontrollably as they try to maintain a facade. Behind closed doors, they're undoubtedly not feeling any sense of patriotism as they watch their once promising profit forecasts burn to the ground. The timing couldn't be worse. Trump's tariffs could hit immediately, potentially as soon as next month. Yet, building new factories to avoid these tariffs is no simple task. It takes years to get them up and running. As a result, GM is stuck in a paradox, paying massive tariffs while simultaneously investing billions into new factories that won't be operational until 2027. It's akin to paying rent on an old apartment while also paying a mortgage on a new home that won't be built for years. Meanwhile, companies like Tesla and Rivian, who opted to build their factories in the US from the start, are watching this entire situation unfold, likely with a sense of amusement. It's clear that sometimes luck can outweigh strategic planning, as evidenced by Elon Musk, who's probably tweeting a cryptic meme about it right now. In response to the looming tariffs, GM's strategy seems to be gradually shifting production back to the US, with plans to ramp up local manufacturing. To accelerate their transition to electric vehicles and optimize their existing production capabilities, GM plans to maximize output from their current US factories while simultaneously constructing new ones. They're making a significant investment in electric vehicles, which they can develop from the ground up in the US without disrupting their existing production lines. However, the most challenging aspect of this transition is the time it will take. Even with a hefty $59 billion, GM cannot quickly establish new factories in the US or avoid paying tariffs in the meantime. Over the years, as they gradually ramp up domestic production, they will face the burden of these tariffs. This process can be likened to attempting to fix a flat tire while the car is still moving, technically possible but messy and risky. The big question is whether this massive investment will be enough to satisfy former President Trump, who is not known for his patience or understanding of complex manufacturing issues. Trump demands immediate results, preferring tangible jobs and victories to highlight at rallies, whereas GM is presenting him with a 5-year plan full of spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides. The meeting between Trump and GM's leadership can be likened to offering vegetables to a toddler who's demanding ice cream. It's bound to be uncomfortable. In fact, the discomfort is probably on par with sitting on a cactus, which might even be more pleasant than trying to explain supply chain economics to someone who believes international trade operates like a casino. When Mary walked into Trump's office, she came prepared with investment plans and economic data, while Trump arrived with his signature ability to claim victory, regardless of the outcome. Picture this: a savvy businesswoman meets a powerful figure known for his Twitter antics. One brings spreadsheets, the other brings social media posts. What could possibly go wrong? From the start, the meeting was tense. GM's team had spent weeks preparing, creating detailed presentations about their electric vehicle plans and autonomous driving investments. Mary probably spent her morning practicing her "please don't destroy our company" face in front of the mirror. The conversation quickly turned to the substantial $4 to $5 billion impact from tariffs that GM had been dealing with, adding more pressure to an already difficult situation. During my last visit to the White House, I had the opportunity to speak with the president, but I've also been in communication with many members of his administration. Meanwhile, Trump was likely preoccupied with admiring his hair and strategizing which words to emphasize when he later announced his big win. As for GM, Barra outlined the company's ongoing investment plans for the United States, including advancements in electric vehicles and self-driving technology. These initiatives weren't new, as General Motors had been working on them for years, even before Trump had threatened tariffs. It was similar to when a child claims to have cleaned their room after a parent threatens to take away their phone, even though the child had actually started cleaning an hour earlier. Trump listened to these plans with that signature squinty expression. During the meeting, Trump seemed to pretend he understood complex issues, immediately jumping in after the second speaker finished. He claimed credit for bringing jobs back to America, attributing it to his tariffs. However, the investments he mentioned were already in progress long before his influence. It was as if Trump believed the sun rose because of his tweets. The conversation turned uncomfortable when Barr tried to explain that imposing immediate tariffs could actually lead to job losses in the short term before any new ones were created. Trump, however, kept interrupting with chants of jobs, 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 disregarding Barr's arguments grounded in math and economics. It was like trying to explain calculus to a goldfish that only shouted, "Water is wet." Throughout the meeting, Trump kept repeating his claims about bringing manufacturing back to the USA, pointing to GM's $59 billion investment plans as if they were his own accomplishment, insisting that they were investing because of me. I told Mary that she either had to invest in America or face the consequences, and she chose to invest in reality. Meanwhile, GM was desperately trying to avoid a financial disaster, while Trump was busy planning his victory parade. The strangest part of it all was watching Barr smile and nod as Trump took credit for pushing her into this decision. She had no choice but to play along. Arguing with Trump was like trying to reason with a tornado, loud, destructive, and utterly pointless. She kept smiling through gritted teeth, probably imagining adding Trump's face to her office dartboard. But why had Barr rushed to meet with the tariff king in the first place? Simply put, she needed to buy time. The entire meeting felt like a last-ditch effort to negotiate exceptions or delays to the looming tariff crisis that was about to hit her company. She presented compliance plans that highlighted how GM would eventually increase its manufacturing in America, pleading desperately, "Please, please don't impose those tariffs tomorrow, pretty please," with a cherry on top. However, the meeting concluded with Trump doing what he does best, declaring a resounding victory while ultimately solving nothing. He exited the room, walked to waiting reporters, and proudly announced that GM was now very pro-America thanks to his exceptional deal-making skills. Meanwhile, Barra's team quietly slipped out through the side door, already texting their lawyers about potential tariff exemptions. Did GM manage to escape the looming tariff disaster? The final chapter of this corporate drama is still unfolding. GM got what they wanted, the opportunity to present their case and possibly delay the inevitable. Trump achieved his goal with the tariff train. He got a chance to boast about pressuring a major company to submit to his demands. However, the only ones who didn't benefit were American consumers, who may end up paying thousands of dollars more for their next car. In this instance, the strange relationship between politics and business has left ordinary people as the losers. General Motors, initially criticized for sending jobs to Mexico, was forced to play the role of America's hero, committing to spend $59 billion they hadn't planned for. This is how politics operates these days, with policies shifting faster than Trump's changing narratives about election fraud. Whether GM genuinely relocates production or just pretends to until 2024, Trump will undoubtedly be taking credit for the outcome on TV. He'll point at the factories that were already under construction before his tariff outburst, claiming that he played a role in it. But the real victims of this are the people, your wallet, your next car. It's about to cost you an extra $3,000, all because two wealthy individuals couldn't come to an agreement on where to build cars. Politics at play.